Hello everyone, and welcome back to Saturday Night Stories. This is Kara from the North Liberty branch, and tonight I am going to be reading from Weird Indiana. This is a compilation of weird stories and ghost tales from throughout Indiana. And this story is called Mother of a Ghost Story, Step Cemetery. A secluded corner of Morgan Monroe State Forest near Bloomington is home to a small cemetery, its few tombstones weather-worn and illegible. Surrounded by the shadows and deep silence of the woods, Step Cemetery is a peaceful and beautiful spot, as one could wish to while away an eternity. In one corner, next to a small grave, there was for many years a strange object that was the subject of speculation and tales. It was the stump of a fallen tree that had been carefully cracked into a sort of chair. It was known to generations of local teenagers as the witch's throne. But if legend is to be believed, it is not the seat of a witch, but of a woman whose grief took her beyond the bounds of sanity and into the realm of Hoosier folklore. The woman's real name has been forgotten over the years, but she is most often called Anna. Stories vary as to her origin, but most agree that she and Jacob, her husband, settled into a homestead not far from the Step Cemetery in the early 1900s, in search of a land and a new life. Life was not easy, but they managed to get along, and when Anna gave birth to a daughter named Emily, the family's happiness was complete. But then Jacob died in an accident at the quarry and was buried in Step Cemetery. Circumstances did not allow Anna to become immobilized by grief, and she threw herself into providing for herself and her growing daughter. She became obsessed with protecting her. She walked her to school each day, kept a careful eye on her when the girl was home. Even when Emily turned 16, her mother maintained watch and control over her. Emily was an obedient child, but it was only a matter of time before she would want to venture into the world. One day, a young man who attended high school with her appeared at the cabin to ask Anna for permission to take Emily to the dance the following Saturday night. Anna's immediate instinct was to refuse, but the boy seemed nice and respectful. Reluctantly, Anna agreed, provided they returned home by 10 p.m. The following Saturday evening was lovely, but the air had a softness that foretold the possibility of rain. The young man led Emily to his car, and with a renewed promise to be home early, they drove down the road and into the gathering dusk. Anna felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach, and as events turned out, this feeling might well have been prophetic. True to indications, the clear spring evening gave way to rain by mid-evening, and the roads became slick. The couple stayed at the dance longer than they intended, and they were speeding home to comply with Emily's curfew when the car slid off the road and collided headlong with a tree. Emily was killed. She was buried at Step Cemetery, just a few steps above her father's grave. Emily's death was the final blow for Anna. She had lost her last shred of happiness in life, ironically due in part to the rigid curfew she had set. She became a recluse, subsisting on vegetables from her garden and no longer venturing into town or church. The few who saw her said she always wore mourning clothes, a long black dress and a shawl, even in the summer. The only place she was ever seen outside her farm was Step Cemetery. She visited daily, sitting by Emily's grave for hours and talking to her daughter as though she were still alive. Happenstance would soon provide Anna with a more comfortable setting for her visits. One spring, lightning struck a tree not far from Emily's grave. The blackened stump that remained had the vague form of a chair. Taking a sharp knife and a hatchet with her to the cemetery, Anna carefully reshaped the stump to provide a natural chair on which to sit during her long visits there. Those passing by the cemetery began to report seeing a figure in black seated on her throne at one end of the graveyard. If approached, Anna would quickly walk away to a nearby grove of trees, where she would stare ominously at the intruders until their departure. Locals began to avoid the cemetery, saying that the old lady who frequented it was crazy. It was best, all agreed, to leave the woman in black alone. Eventually, Anna died. It is supposed that she was buried near her husband and daughter, yet no headstone can be found there. However, if the stories have sprung up after her death are to be believed, she left behind a memorial more macabre than any tombstone. Since the early 1950s, rumors have persisted of the sightings of a strange dark figure in the cemetery, seated at the witch's throne. Local teenagers believed that if you touched the throne beneath the light of a full moon, you would die an unnatural death within a year. Many made nocturnal visits to the cemetery, most coming back disappointed. A few, however, returned shaken, swearing they witnessed a dark shape rise from the seat and advance toward them out of the gloom. Others have reported a curious phenomenon associated with the mound of earth next to the chair, which is reputed to be Emily's grave. It is said that an object placed here at nightfall will be moved to another spot by the next morning, even if watch is kept to prevent human intervention. Perhaps Anna still guards the grave of her beloved Emily. The cemetery grounds were eventually incorporated into Morgan Monroe State Forest and are under the guardianship of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. It is said that the chair has been vandalized and partially destroyed, but if the stories are true, no one will ever be able to remove the sad figure that occupies it.